Hi, my name is Chirali with Blaze Responsibly, and I'm a proud partner of Ascend's Collab for Social Equity. So today we're going to talk about the history of cannabis and how we got here and why is the plant illegal and criminal. When our colonizers first came to the United States, and I'm focusing on just the history of the United States, but when they first came here, early 16th century, 17th century, the production of hemp or cannabis was widely encouraged. They were using it for clothing, they were using it for rope, sails, even as medicinal reasons. And there was actually patented medicines out on the market, believe it or not. But then something happened in 1910. It was the Mexican Revolution, and we started to see immigrants coming into the country, and they were introducing the plant for recreational purposes. There was an underlying fear that with the influx of immigrants, potentially the increase of violence or crime, that they associated marijuana or cannabis to be a correlating factor. And they decided that this is no longer a benefit anymore, and they wanted to criminalize it. Or so it started. 1930s, Great Depression is happening. Reefer Madness came out, which was a propaganda film that showed this is what happens when you utilize marijuana and you go crazy and all these negative things, instilling fear in people. Underlying racism tones, because what started in the 1910s continued in the 1930s. Jazz musicians had introduced the plant as well. It's constantly being associated with people of color using the plant, and then negative fear tactics. Also, what happened during this time was alcohol was no longer prohibited. There was a whole era of prohibition. Now alcohol is freely available. So a gentleman named Henry Henslinger decided to form the Bureau of Federal Narcotics. And their main priority was to go after various drugs, but particularly marijuana or cannabis. And so we started to see the policing of it. And shortly thereafter, in 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed. This, in essence, criminalized the plant because now there's penalties associated with even possessing this plant. But when World War II happened, there was a change in the tone with the plant because now the Department of Agriculture was encouraging farmers again to grow hemp. And there was a whole campaign like, if you're an American farmer, we need you to grow hemp, because they needed to make other products for the military, like parachutes, for example, which can be made out of the hemp fiber. Once the war ended, though, the tone obviously went back to negative. Then again, in the 1960s, you had another pop culture or cultural connotations where people were using the plant and things were going well. And then ultimately, Richard Nixon, when he was the president, there was something called the Schaefer Commission. And this group basically put a report together that said that cannabis or marijuana actually has medicinal values. There are benefits, and they had this, hundreds of pages of detailed information. Nixon literally threw it in the trash and was like, I'm not going to do anything with this. I'm going to ignore it. The Controlled Substances Act was enacted essentially, and marijuana was placed on a Schedule I, and it was treated as a drug, how it is today at the federal level. And then that was continued to be perpetuated when you had Reagan take office, and there was a whole anti-war campaign, and mandatory minimums were enacted for even possession of cannabis or marijuana. And then in 1989, former President George Bush also declared a war on drugs, with marijuana being another one of the drugs that they considered. So really how we got here today is a history of some really bad policies against people of color for utilizing the plant for recreational purposes, and just a ton of fear. And so hopefully better days are ahead, but that's a brief history of cannabis in the United States.